Alright, hello, how are you? This is Exile. I do have a channel by that name. Posted videos there for a while. That was mostly philosophy. Since then, I've really dug into the facts and the science. And that's what I'm going to use this channel for, even though I may post this one over on that channel as well. I do think space travel is impossible, and I think I will be able to adequately prove that in this presentation, simultaneously clearing up misconceptions about action at a distance, which is gravity, and contact action, which is causality through contact, or making something move through contact. I'd like to point out two other things before I continue. The first would be that gravity is an accepted fact, but it's not factually proven. And you can look that up just about anywhere, that it is an accepted fact. And it wouldn't have to be an accepted fact if it was just a fact. So gravity is not a fact, despite how many people like to say it. It's only accepted as a fact because they don't think it will be disproven, which is weird because I think I'm going to do that right in this presentation. And I think it's easy to disprove. Humans, the second thing I want to point out is that humans can imagine things that are not represented in the physical world. It happens all the time, and it's not just, there's all kinds of scientific theories that have come and gone. The aquatic ape theory is hilarious, and that's a theory that has come and gone. There's all kinds of ideas and concepts and theories that a man can imagine, or a woman, or human can imagine, that you'll never see. My favorite one to point out is the xenomorph from the Aliens movies. And I like Alien and Aliens. They're really good movies, and the xenomorph was an awesome bad guy and totally scary, especially when I was a little kid when those movies came out. So just an example of how a man or a woman can imagine things that you'll never actually see happen before your eyes in the physical world. So I think this all hinges on one thing, and I think it's easy to prove that space travel is impossible. So let's take a look at that. Air density. It all hinges on that. And people probably don't understand that because of all the misconceptions about what gravity really is or can do, and what contact action really is, and how our whole world operates on that principle. There's no exceptions to that. If you know one, I'd like to hear it. So nothing eliminates space travel quicker than air density. And I think that if anybody really understands how a rocket works, they would see that they're trying to say it operates on two opposing principles. So let's talk about first let's just talk about the significance of air density. All right, so at sea level, air density is 100%. I don't think anyone's going to dispute that. By 85,000 feet or 16 miles, air density is 2%. I would like to assert that I don't think we can travel higher than 125,000 feet or 24 miles. That might even be generous. But air density is definitely going to be less than 2% at that point. And then they believe that space begins at 328,000 feet, which is 62 miles above the Earth, where air density is, 0.00003%. Now, I hope you noticed something. Within the first 16 miles, you lost 98% of air density. Now, there's a lot of atmosphere because they say it goes on and on up there, but it's much thinner, so the air density, 98% of it's gone within 16 miles. And then you have to go another 45 miles where air density is waning fast. Well, not fast, actually. It drags on, but it's like already nothing by 16 miles, and then you have to get 45 miles as it's getting super thin, and you're also dumping your fuel tanks at about 150,000 feet, according to NASA. So when you're going to need the most thrust or push or escape velocity, which I'll point out later, you actually don't even have the fuel. You've dumped all those external tanks. So I definitely think that once you get about 85,000 feet, which is where the SR-71 got, it tried to go higher and disintegrated. I'll point that out in a little bit and talk about that just for a minute. Air density is 2%. I think that's about the roof. That's the ceiling. That's the limit. The sky's not the limit. 85,000 feet and air density of 2% is the real limit. Now, things that won't help that NASA will talk about at length, sidestepping or dancing around air density, is fuel. They'll talk about the amounts and the types. There's, that those solid rocket boosters each carry, there's two of them, they each carry 1.1 million pounds of fuel. So they are burning a lot of fuel, which is all gone and dumped by 150,000 feet. They also talk about the type, the most interesting one being liquid oxygen, which they say it helps them be able to burn or get a burn in space, which is funny. If you're operating a rocket on the principle of action at a distance, what do you need combustion for? Why don't you just pop an air tank and push the thing? It'd be much cheaper. But like I said, it's a narration. I don't think it really works. Rocket science, real or imagined. Of course, there's real rockets. There's a picture of one right here. I'm just saying the imagined part is that a single rocket that definitely operates in contact action, as pictured here, suddenly is going to go into space and now not need to operate on that principle and be able to push off of nothing. That makes absolutely no sense. Aerodynamics fail jet engines, planes, by 85,000 feet. So I don't understand. Well, obviously the shuttle has aerodynamics for when re-entry, because I think they got tired of dropping tin cans out in the middle of the ocean. But especially if there's people in them, and that would be interesting how that worked out. But that'd be terrible. So obviously, flying home from wherever you space or wherever, whatever the narration you believe in, is going to be much better if you could do it like in a jet plane. But if aerodynamics, which means you have to get enough speed to get enough lift under your wings, fails, then why the hell would a rocket work any better past that point? And weight reduction, of course, would be significant. As I already told you, they're carrying a ton of weight just to get to the 150,000 foot mark, where once they do drop all those external tanks, the shuttle itself still weighs 165,000 pounds, which is 3 times more than the SR-71. And of course, the narration is that they're doing all this to get enough speed to achieve escape velocity. They're going to escape the principle of contact action and get into an action at a distance world and be able to push off of nothing and move around, which I think is ludicrous. So let's take a look at why I think it is. Contact action is a simple principle. Once you trim all the fat, this crosscut saw is a beautiful example of it, and it doesn't need fuel or a machine unless you're considering the human machine, which is viable. The human has to operate it. It's a 2-man procedure. 1 man on one side, 1 on the other. You see the 2 handles, 1 pulls, 1 pushes. And that's what contact action is. To move anything, and I do mean anything at all, you have to pull it or push it. And this crosscut saw is a beautiful example of that principle. It doesn't get any better than that when you're trying to explain how this principle works. And you will not find, and I challenge you to find one example where this doesn't work in the physical world that you can see with your eyes. See one example of something operating outside of this principle that moves without something moving it, pulling it, or pushing it. Now I was talking about the SR-71. This is the Pratt & Whitney J58. It's the jet engine that's used for that plane. It's a beautiful plane. It has to go about Mach 3.2 to achieve the speed of about 2,200 miles per hour to get to the 85,000 feet. It might actually have to go faster. But when it does, the spike in the front here on the left is retracted fully so that it can take in as much air density and push out as much as it can to get enough lift under the wing so that it can fly at that speed. And you have to wear a spacesuit at 85,000 feet or your blood will boil in your body. That's how different things are up at 85,000 feet, which is 16 miles. But as you can see, this jet engine operates the same as the crosscut saw. Even though their operational functions are different, they still operate on the same principle of pulling and pushing. Now here you have the shuttle. Its only difference is that it doesn't pull, it only pushes. But the shuttle, the SR-71, and the crosscut saw all operate on the same principle. It has to make contact in order to function. If it doesn't push off of anything, or pull or push, it doesn't work. It won't have any way to move. And even if you could achieve escape velocity, how the hell would you get back? I mean, I guess if you believe in gravity, that would have to pull you down. But I'm saying the air density is not going to allow this magical event to happen. And unfortunately, rocket science can't defy the principle of contact action. You can't have a rocket built to do one thing suddenly get high enough in the sky and now it can do something totally different, operate on a totally different principle. Here's the perfect example. Try to do push-ups off the surface of water. Of course you can't, obviously. If you could probably walk on water and you'd be, the next Jesus. It's a ludicrous idea, but it's funny how you think a rocket can do it at 150,000 feet. You push off of air density less than 2%, but that's okay. But somehow, when you think about pushing off water, that's easy to see as stupid. That's because that's what you see in the physical world. In the physical world around you, you can see that you don't push off water. But what if we suspended you above the water, with rubber bands or something, or people just held you up? And then we did all the things to you that we did to the rocket so that you would have a better chance of pushing off the surface of that water. You get trained up and you just master push-ups. Your arms turn to these big guns like these massive rockets, the big guns, and you can do push-ups super fast, and you got velocity, escape velocity. We'll give you a wetsuit. I know it's more of aerodynamics, but we'll put webbing in the fingers so that you have more surface contact with the water. We give you rocket fuel, whatever you want, Gatorade, Red Bull. There's nothing we can reduce your weight, man. You can trim the fat. Nothing we do to you is going to allow you to push off the surface of that water, and nothing you do to that rocket is going to allow it to push it off air density for 35, 45 miles when it's paper thin, when it's less than 2%. But there is something we could do to make this happen. It'd be real easy if we froze the water. Then you could do push-ups off the surface of water. But unfortunately, this is something you can't do to air density. You can't freeze it. And I know that temperature does affect it, but come on, man, that is the difference is negligible. Marginal at best. It's not going to be so thick that you can get into space. That's 45 miles. Plus, even if it got thicker, it's not going to be that thick. It wouldn't even change the effects. I think you'd get to about 125,000 feet or less, and that would be the end of the ride. That's why when you watch the shuttle launch, it gets a tight shot once it gets really high. You can't really gauge anything off of it. You're just seeing, a horror movie version where it's just a super tight shot and you just see the shuttle taking up the whole frame. It drops its tanks. You have no idea how high it really is, and looking from the ground, you can't gauge that. You can't judge that distance, man. And then all of a sudden, cut scene, and boom, you're in space. So it's not that hard to fake, really. But you can change the surface of you could change the water, and then you could do push-ups, but you can't do anything for air density. So let's do some other examples, because there are a lot of examples that are argued about, and they're all butchered. The bird, the book, and the balloon. Those are, three of my favorites, and I see the most. So look at the bird. Look how it's built. Let's just say we come to the shore, and there's this chair here, and a bird flies in and lands on one of the armrests. How did it get there? It flew. And what is flying? It's a machine. It's an organic beast machine, I grant it, but it's designed to fly. It has hollow bones, and it has feathers that are specially designed to push off air density. Those feathers and those wings aren't designed to resist mass, because what gravity is mass attracting mass. Those feathers don't push off gravitational pull. They push off of air density, obviously. That's contact action. It's a machine. The bird is a living machine. It's organic, but it perfectly demonstrates contact action. In fact, if the bird jumped off that armrest and landed in the sand, it would spread its wings to glide down, because it would just use its wings to glide down through the air density. And that's, what do you think a glider does? It's resisting the air. It's the air is coming up against the wing as it goes down. It's not gravity. It's not pulling it down. That would make no sense. It would be designed completely different if it was just worried about being attracted by a larger mass than itself. The book, that's a great one. I love that one. Somebody's all, hey, pick up a book and drop it, man. You just proved gravity. Flat Earth debunked. Density debunked. It's not, because you had to pick up the book. That's contact action. Your whole experiment just got shot to shit because it required you to pick it up and move it. It doesn't matter what you do after you drop it. You can say anything after that point. You can say leprechauns are casting spells and making the book drop. All you'll see is the book drop, and you can know that it's dropping because it's denser than air. There's no, at what point does gravity rear its magical head? You never see any effects of gravity, especially when you had to pick it up in the first place. And then the balloon is just beautiful, because let's just say there's a balloon laying on the other armrest, okay, and a string, and there's a helium tank nearby. The balloon, if you pick it up and drop it, it's going to fall right to the earth because it's denser than air. And then what happens when you add mass to it? Because remember, gravity is mass attracting mass. The mass of the sun attracts the mass of the earth. The mass of the earth attracts the mass of the balloon. But in this case, when you add mass, the helium, it gets lighter. It goes up in the air, and people are like, oh, that's because of air density. Exactly. It's because of air density, because the helium is just a little bit lighter than the oxygen or air. And it's only a little bit, and it's easy to see, because if you just put a little bit of helium in that balloon, it's not going to change. It's still going to drop, and the helium will escape really fast anyway. And it's spread out so quick, it wouldn't have any effect on the balloon. You'd have to fill the balloon to get the desired effect for it to rise. That's because the helium is only just a little bit less dense than the air. So you need a lot of it. And what happens when you reduce mass? It drops to the ground. So when you decrease mass, it drops faster than when you increase mass. And I think that just blows up the entire concept of gravity. 3 examples right there. The shuttle, the SR-71, crosscut saw, all these things operate on contact action. They could not move unless somebody caused them to move by making contact, or a machine was built that needed fuel and operated on that same exact principle. So where is the gravity? You only see it in space. You'll never see it on the Earth, because it doesn't exist. And you have to remember that no matter what you're trying to say about it in an argument, contact action, which requires contact to move something, and action at a distance, which doesn't, these two principles are diametrically opposed and conflict with each other. Could you imagine a world where both of these things operated? This place would be a chaotic mess. That's why there has to be uniformity. Even when you're talking about space and all these ridiculous amounts of millions of miles between the sun and the earth and other planets and, light years and stuff, you're trying to claim how gravity is uniform. And even that fails. Because I think 2 of the planets are retro-rotational. They go in the opposite direction, and then they talk about, well, it's on its axis. Well, how can you tell? But I'll get to that whole tidal locked illusion thing in a minute. And I want to try to wrap this up quick, because I've already been going on for 19 minutes. But I think if you look at these things and you understand that contact action requires causality through contact, you have to move it or create a machine that can move it. It's not going to move by itself. Otherwise, if you had gravity or lived in a gravitational world and that book was sitting on that cushion, you would just use telekinesis. You wouldn't need a machine. You would just command it to come to you, and it would come to you. And that would be action at a distance. Or it would rotate around you. Oh, no, it doesn't work that way. I know it doesn't work that way because it's contact action. You have to pick it up. But you have to be willing to be objective and look at it, what you're actually saying about these principles. But let's continue. Because unfortunately, for both sides, it's not just rounders. Don't just blame them. Flat earthers don't get this concept much better. And I don't think they get it better at all. Most people don't get it. And we'll take a look at an example of that. Boom, right here. Now, let's just say, for argument's sake, especially if you're a rounder, this is just hypothetical. Let's say this model existed. There was a dome, which if the earth is flat, and I don't know that it's flat, I just suspect that it is. I think that it's probably flat because I don't think it's round. I'm pretty sure. In fact, I know it's not round. I'm convinced it's not round, and I'm convinced. I know for a fact we don't go into space. That's just ridiculous. There's no way you could do that until you do create a zero gravity machine. It's never going to happen. But let's just say the flat earth is shaped like this. It's round and like a disc, and it's got ice walls keeping the water in. It doesn't have to be ice walls. It could be mountains or piles of sand or other continents or whatever. But there is a problem with this model, even for a flat earther. If you don't believe in gravity and you don't think that's space up there and that's a dome, why in the hell are the sun and the moon acting as if they were operating on the principle of action at a distance or gravity? This doesn't make any sense. This completely conflicts. This model is nonsensical. And I'm not trying to insult anybody or put anyone down who believes in this model. I'm urging you to reconsider it, because the sun and the moon floating above a flat plane is gravity, just a really different, twisted version of gravity. And there's, like I said, there's uniformity. It's nature conforms, otherwise it will conflict and destroy itself. There's no way that this is going to work. Something would be going crazy wrong up there in the sky if you had a sun and a moon that floated through the open space above the earth. What I'm saying is that the sun and the moon are obviously connected to the firmament or the roof or the ceiling or the dome or whatever you choose to call it, that they don't float like this. And if you are a flat earther and you believe this, I would just urge you to reconsider and find a more continuous model that actually makes sense with the principles that you believe in. Or maybe that's what hopefully you're finding out that that's what's going on, and you'll see that. But let's just go to this tidal lock thing I was talking about earlier. Okay, so you got the moon over here. Let's say it's, no matter what model is, we could say it's, the round earth is true right now, or we could say the flat earth is true right now. It doesn't matter, because the moon, which would be the nail in the coffin or the smoking gun, terms that people like to throw around right now, is tidal locked. You can only see one side of it, of course, because it is a disk of light affixed to the ceiling, and it operates probably, well, I may have a whole theory about that, and I can talk about that in another video. That's not the point of this video, but the point is that you only see one side of it, and it just happens to be tidal locked. And don't think the planets prove anything either, because if you look at the planets, like for example, Jupiter does a full rotation in 9.9 hours. You know how fast that is? You could never witness that through a telescope. It would be out of range before you could witness it. And the storm, the Great Red Spot, never moves. So, I mean, I know you see the one side of it. It might, the rotation or whatever, the disk moves in a different way, but the red spot's always there. It's there every time. And Venus takes it's really slow. It's the opposite of Jupiter. It's like 97 miles per hour, which is super slow. In 9 hours or 10 hours, Jupiter is taking a full rotation, and Venus takes like 247 Earth days to do one rotation. So you won't see it there either. And then all the moons and all the planets that you can see with the telescope, they're all tidal locked. So you don't see any spheres, okay? There's no spheres up there. It's all disks of light. So the sun and the moon are not going to be exceptions. That's my point. So at this point, if you're seeing things like I am, then there's a lot of things you could just throw in the garbage. Shuttle at 190 miles an hour, trash. ISS at 250 miles, trash. Satellites, trash. Moon landing, trash. Probes, especially probes that land on comets, which is insane, trash. Why are they trash? Because you can't get anything up there. And I don't know how you're going to narrate. I mean, I know there's a story, but could you imagine landing a probe on something that moves like 10,000 miles per hour? I mean, no pilot would ever believe that. Pilots, they'd be beyond control. You'd have to have computers doing it. And then how would you write a computer program that can do it? How would you write the program? Based off what? Based off what? We don't write, computer programs don't write reality. Reality writes computer programs. So how would you write the computer program to negotiate landing on a comet moving at 10,000 miles an hour? And what angle would you do that? Well, it's going to blow up. So, I mean, that story is ridiculous in and of itself. So, the last point I want to make really quick is that I think only large amounts of the herd, that would be us, the regular people, we're the herd, really believe in this bullshit. All the people that have access to information, that put out information like NASA does, most of them, at least up in the higher ranks, they know it's bullshit. And I think they're telling you that. And so let's just take a look at an example. Look at this picture, man. You can't. I know I've heard all the arguments, like, this picture's like a year old or whatever. And I've heard all the arguments like, December 9th was the last shuttle. They would have had to take all 16 playoff teams plus the teams in contention and threw a bunch of jerseys in a box that all had the number 51 on them, and that'd be super expensive. Why would they do that? Or they're just in some tank somewhere and this is all bullshit, which I think they're telling you, but I'll explain them why, not because of any of these reasons. And then the other one is that the NFL is fixed and they knew it was going to win ahead of time. But that's not what this is about. Those are for people who are still trying to, who still struggle with cognitive dissonance and still struggle with why the mainstream does weird things like this. Because let's be honest, are these jerseys necessary for any reason? Does the NFL need to advertise? I mean, they do have a monopoly. They're not hurting at all. And NASA can just ask for money whenever they want, so they're not hurting for money. How hard is it to say, hey, we're going to launch another rocket, we need another $15 million or $15 billion? They can ask for money and pretty much get it. And that, like Tyson says, they only spend 1.5%. So what does it matter if they chalk it up to 2.5% one week? Ask for another $10 billion. No, that's completely, it's a lame argument. So look at this picture now. What do you see? It's a staged event. They could have just taken a whiteboard, wrote Super Bowl 51, put the two teams' names on there, and wrote the scores that they predicted. Because I think I saw I saw a recording of it, but I saw the event where Tony Siragusa, who is a football player, I think he played for the Ravens, is interviewing these guys and he's asking for predictions and stuff. And they're all looking up at the screen and stuff like they're up in space. Come on, it's staged. It's theatrics, man. That's what this is. And to have these jerseys on them is for them is a stage event, and they're telling you, look, man, it's bullshit. We can't just come right out and say it because the dissonance would be deafening. And we just spent all these years lying about it. And we got to blame other people. And we got to slowly transit into the flat earth model, which is what I think they're doing. It's already getting into the mainstream. It's in papers. I think it's the Guardian Online and the Denver Post or whatever, and it'll move further into the mainstream. It'll become a debate, and eventually the flat earth will be the model. And this is what this is telling you, man. This isn't telling you anything other than this, that ISS is bullshit. And there's a bunch of other ways you can tell, but I think if you take a close look at what this picture really is telling you, all those narrations about how this is happening are nothing compared to the fact that they are just simply telling you it's time to dump the round earth. They're going to keep arguing for it because you got to have a debate in the mainstream or else you can't have a winner. If there's no fight between flat earth and round earth, you can't have a winner if you don't fight. So they're going to have a big mainstream slugfest, and the flat earth will probably come out the winner, and it'll be the model. It's been the model before. I'll give you another example. About atomism, right? We are the third time that's known, like quickly looking it up in history, that atomism has been the reigning model for how things are constructed out of particles and subatomic particles and matter, molecules, and so on. That's atomism. We're not the first people to ever have believed in that. Epicurus believed in atomism. Okay, and that was, I mean, Newton referred to him. Okay, so it's been around for a long time. Man, there's a lot more I'd like to say about how this all sizes up, but I hope that you got something out of this, something useful that will help you delineate between the bullshit and what's really going on. Because you're never going to get the whole truth. You can't control a large herd of people by just dropping the truth on them all the time. Then they can make decisions for themselves, and you don't want that. So things like this are set up for people to slowly start to understand, and it'll become more and more obvious. But in any case, if you still believe that we're on around Earth, whipping through space, it's all good because it's going to change anyway. And if you're a flat earther, you're not special. Trust me, you didn't figure it out by yourself. Those guys didn't figure it out by themselves. You don't think DeBay and Mark Sargent and Math Powerland or whatever, Boylan Powerland, whatever his last name is, and even Jaron. I saw Jaronism get started on YouTube. I mean, I remember when he was like just getting in, and Mark Sargent took him under his wing. You think these guys just all sitting around one day and figured out the Earth was flat? No, somebody told them. They're gatekeepers. Noam Chomsky, gatekeeper. There's tons of gatekeepers, and they have valuable information, and you need to collect it and use it and add it to the things that you know are true and jettison the stuff that's bullshit. But in any case, whatever you do, man, good luck. I hope you figure it out. And in any case, whatever you do believe, man, just have a great day.